Projects Committee to order for September the 2nd, 2021 at 3:02. All members are present at this point. Mr. Becker has resigned from the board, so Mrs. Dobler is filling in, and she will be officially part of the committee at the become official part of the committee at the next board meeting. Do we have any courtesy of the floor? Mr. Francis.
Under item F, A, the Johnson House. This is the wife of the Johnson House now for quite some time, and the owner of the body shop and the facility next to it is encroaching, moving, and it's making a mess of things where we're doing there. I think that would be a good time to just let's sell it, get rid of it, and don't have to worry about all the trash. A lot of people do not see that's not a good entrance. So
well, you're not going to get rid of the body shop, but
we keep calling this a feasibility study. Can we call it a facility study?
Sure.
A facility study precedes a feasibility study, the way I interpret our state laws, et cetera, depending on what we're doing. Maybe we just want to look at that. 1925, we spent $250,000 on the first new high school we ever built, and we were recognized for the use of brick and mortar in our structures. And ever since then, we've done the same. We've used brick and mortar in all our buildings and structures. And you folks have always maintained and upkept our buildings in excellent condition and make them last. We expect we can get at least 200 years out of all of our buildings. So all along, I compliment all you people for doing what you do and taking care of everything very well. Thank you.
thank you. Any other courtesy of the floor? All right, letter C, feasibility/facility study review. Dr. Ulmer?
I want to start by reviewing what we presented as a committee to the full board, that we really had 3 steps in our priorities, one being our HVAC upgrades, and then moving into building, I'm calling it building envelope, the windows, doors, roof, maybe brick. If there's brick that needs repointed or something like that. The goal of the committee really was that we presented to the board. We wanted to make sure that the building stayed healthy. So anywhere on the outside that could be problematic, we want that to be in the second priority. And we also are prioritizing athletic facilities. So that is just a reminder that that is what we as a committee discussed with the whole board. For today, I really want to talk about our next steps and where we are going to go with this study. First of all, the idea that we discussed at the last board meeting of having an executive session that would under safety and security to review those maps, that we could display those maps and walk through the building room by room. I did reach out to Michael Jones from Hunt Engineering, and he indicated that he and his team would make whatever day, time, work that we as a board wanted. So I guess my question for this committee is, how would you like me to how would you prefer me schedule that type of meeting? On a separate day than a board meeting? And I'm looking for input and how you would like to go about scheduling that scenario.
I would almost think it would have to be, because I look for it to be lengthy. That's just my own opinion. And probably one of the better dates is to stay on a Monday. One of the Mondays that, I mean, isn't that pretty much what we did when we did those other open ones? We did Mondays.
I think so.
Yeah, that you stay on one of the off Mondays that we don't have a board meeting.
So a Monday night, not a board meeting night.
Right.
Okay. I will ask him for dates that works for them, but I think that based on his response already, they will probably try to have someone from the team make it work whatever day that we say this is the day we want to do that. And I will invite the whole board so that anyone who can attend is able to see those maps. And I mean, you all have them, but I think we need to walk through them as a team and look at what we have where and what that means for how those buildings are addressed. I also am pointing out that they had asked that if there would be any questions that they would be submitted. I will keep reminding the board as a whole that if there's any questions about their report, I will resubmit them. But we did offer them coming back after you've had time to digest their report and ask specific questions to them. I guess we can discuss that after we have the meeting where we walk through the maps. I think we'll have probably a better idea of what our questions are. Is it feasible to say, well, we'll walk through the maps, and then if we need them to come back again, we can do that at another public meeting?
I think that is better, because that was my interpretation. We would do the work session first, and then that will create questions more than
I have, and I only put this item on here just so that this committee knew the direction that I was taking. The study comparison, I heard a lot of questions at the board meeting about the difference in the numbers between your 2018 study, which I did pull a copy of, and I can make copies. I have it electronically. If I did have one request, I can make copies if anybody else wants one. I'll make a note. Mr. Kinley. So I am attaching a document to your update for the whole board this week that was my review of what I saw. And I'm offering to share that in a future public meeting, but I think it will be helpful for you to see it first as a board to know what I discovered. So I'll briefly explain what I understand based on looking back through the study. And obviously you heard Hunt present that they used an average class size of 23. So the first problematic issue is Crabtree used 25 and Hunt used 23. So right away, you're going to have a difference because they use two different numbers. And I heard Hunt say, we can go back to them and say, we don't like 23, we want it to be whatever. But you have Crabtree used 25 and Hunt used 23. So the number's going to be lower from the beginning. The other thing that I discovered, and I'm trying to find the correct page of this because I saw it in the study. Crabtree's study, and I know the numbers were really high, and the numbers at the elementaries are not that different. That largely is accounted for between the 23 and 25 number. The middle school and the high school are wildly different. And I know that a lot of you noticed that when they did their presentation. So I went back to the Crabtree study and learned that when you look at the middle school and high school, Crabtree listed in where they have their chart where they came up with their total number. They listed the spaces and the numbers next to the spaces, which is how I was able to figure this out. So for example, in the high school, they listed a capacity number for the pool, the auxiliary gym, the full-size gym, the band room, the chorus room. You get where I'm going. In order for the capacity that Crabtree gave you to be valid, you would have to fill every one of those spaces all day long to get to the number they gave you. Well, you're never going to have 31 kids in the pool all day long, or 30 kids in the auxiliary gym all day long, or 132 kids in the full-size gym every class period of the day. That is how they got that 1,100 number that's in the Crabtree study. So it doesn't mean that Hunt's number couldn't be higher as we look across the map and compare what they had from space to space. And the other thing that I noticed, and I pointed out in my report that I'm going to give to the board, is Crabtree included CTE classrooms at 20 kids in every CTE classroom. Well, in most of those spaces, that's beyond the PDE capacity for a CTE classroom. So you can't assume that you're going to put 20 kids in every CTE classroom, because they're not big enough for 20 kids to be in those programs. So that 1,100 number that you had, that you're trying to rectify, well, why is one company saying this and another company saying this? There is some issues that I have with that number that we're going to have Hunt give us some feedback on. Well, there's some spaces that I think Hunt is low, but I think there's some spaces where Crabtree was high, and you're going to have to figure out how you give them that feedback, so that we'll give them that feedback so that we can start to see what the number is, probably somewhere legitimately between the two.
For the high school.
For the high school and for the middle school. They did the same thing in the middle
Well,
school.
I didn't think the middle school was as far off as the high school was, but.
So, I mean,
But that's
in the middle
personally.
school, they gave a number for the gym, and they gave a number for for example, every computer lab. Well, some of those labs were specifically put in for teachers in classrooms to take kids to a computer lab. You can't count that as a space that's going to be filled every day, period of the day, because that's not what the design of the space was for. So those are some of the things that I'm seeing and I'm pointing out. You're going to see in my report this week, but I wanted to point that out today to this committee, so you knew that I was trying to investigate the difference between the numbers in those two reports.
I'm not sure some of that is in special ed, but you don't have too many of those at the high school anymore.
Yeah, so I'm going to go to one so I make sure I have the right number. So for an example, in Avis, they have indicated that there's 0 support offices and 2 support classrooms. In Avis, there is a reading specialist and a special ed teacher. So based on not having well, I have the map right here in front of me, so I can tell you the answer to that. Yeah, there's one colored differently that's Title I, and one colored differently that's special ed. So I would assume those are the 2 support classrooms that are classroom size, but there's not a regular ed classroom in that room. Yep. Any other questions about that? Okay. And I'm going to move on to the HVAC project. Just as a refresher, we did discuss this at the board meeting. The RFP is posted and available. It will be it was in the paper last weekend. This week will be in again this coming weekend. It is due here September 8th. I have been fielding phone calls from companies asking questions, getting clarifying information, those types of things. On the timeline that I gave you, I recommended that the window to be approved is somewhere between either the 13th meeting or the 27th meeting. I don't believe that I never thought we had time to get it on the 13th meeting, but the 27th meeting still puts us in a good time frame to work with the company to get us in line to approval in November. That will be able to go out for bid. What I heard was Hunt and the construction management companies that I've talked to is December, January bid gives us a really good time frame to get somebody on board, make sure they can get supplies, get us into a next summer work time, and we should be in good shape. So that timeline is, we're still on track with the timeline. My question for this committee, I would like to make a recommendation for the board, at least make a recommendation on the 13th. We don't have to vote on it, but I would like to be able to say, this is how we're going to decide who we're going to put on the agenda on the 27th. So in my RFP that we put out, what we said was, between the 13th and the 27th, if we chose to, depending on who we get or how many we get, we would interview potential companies if we felt we needed to take that step. So my question for you as a group is, A, do you think interviewing them is something you want to do as a committee here? I mean, it could be this committee is doing the interviews and making a recommendation to the board, or would you want those people to make a presentation to the board prior to a selection vote? You can do it either way. You can interview with this group and you can make a recommendation, or you can say, maybe this group looks at them and says, we need the board to decide on these two, or I'm just looking for input.
I think we have a better handle on that when we see what comes in on the 8th that you tell us on the 13th, because
Okay.
there might be a no-brainer. They might be so far apart that we just have to make sure that they're doing. And I also think Hunt could also give us a good indication whether that's a good idea, needed or not.
Okay. So what I can do is, I will, when I get them on the 8th, I will share them with the whole board, and we'll discuss on the 13th how we would like to proceed. We will have time between the 13th and the 27th if we want to get together as this committee and do an interview process, or at least have them give a presentation per se, and then make a recommendation to the full board on who we believe is the best candidate for the project. Now, I will tell you that one of the requirements in the ESSER funding is there has to be a rubric. We have to be able to say, this is why we made this selection. So in the RFP, there is clear, what I did, and I took it from some of the sample RFPs that I got, I put percentages next to each required submission item, so we could easily take it and say, you know, if we sat down as a committee and looked at the applications, we can say, well, I think that their response was a 9 out of 10 and the other response was an 8 out of 10, so that we have a way to score them and firmly be able to say, we had a process and we followed a process in order to make the decision, which is, that is what the federal government will require if we're audited in how we made that decision.
Do they also have identified other projects that they've done that we can check on?
That is part of the submission, is they have to, I think it's worded as they have to give us a history. I'm going to pull it up quick. Here. Projects and experience is the section. So they have to give us other similar projects and their experience in doing those types of projects. With the full board on. Okay. Any other questions about that?
None of them asked you for extra time?
I had one company reach out and say, we don't know if we're going to bid because we don't know that we'd be able to respond by September 8th. And I said, well, based on our timeline, we're going to have to get them by September 8th, or you're going to put yourself behind trying to get the bid process out. But no one has, I've had enough interest in bidding that I don't think the tight timeline is turning people away.
Okay, good.
Once we complete this project, the HVAC upgrades for the high school, are we going to look at upgrading the other buildings that need, before we move on to these other items here? Athletic facilities.
So what this committee discussed and what I don't remember, I think I answered that question to the full board. We want to do all the HVAC upgrades, but we have to do something quickly first with ESSER funds, and then we can do the rest, because we didn't have enough time to do them all at one time and expend the ESSER funds by the deadline. So we had to quickly, and they have to be kept separate. You can't commingle your federal funds with your local funds and have them audited well.
So once we pick this one, and it gets the bids and things like that out, probably after the first of the year, we can start looking at the same process again for the rest of them.
And what I think that came up as a legal question, because I have posed to our solicitor, if we've gone through this process and we've picked a firm to do this first round of work, do we legally have to go back out and go through that same step-by-step again in order to do the same work in a different building in the district? So I posed that question to him to get a legal opinion, because you're already engaged with this contractor, you're doing the same project in a different building, does it have to go back through all of those bid steps again?
And how do you answer that?
I didn't get an answer
Oh,
yet.
okay. Because I'm thinking, okay, because they bid this way here, does that still make them a lowest bidder or whatever that goes? Some of those.
I didn't get an answer yet.
Okay.
By the same token, depending on market conditions, as we saw last year, it might be smart for you to go back.
Right.
Right. I agree with that. We just kind of have to play that by ear when we get to it.
And in that case, you could consider, I've selected this person before, and you could, if you're scoring them, you potentially could give them more points because you have a relationship with them, or you know the quality of their work. I'm not saying we would pre-select, but I asked that question because I know that the board's intent is to keep going, and I don't want to make it a large process to go back through all those steps again if we don't have to.
Just a
Go ahead.
question on that extension. Could we, for the second set of projects, narrow down the contractors to, our top 3 from the first bidding process based on quality?
That's a good question.
That would save us some time. If we've got
Right.
half a dozen contractors, we can nail it down to 3.
Some of that will depend too on what work they have lined up and that, whether they can even bid.
Yeah. You'd be talking a full
Right.
summer afterwards
Right.
by the time you get around to it, so.
I will ask our solicitor again. I believe so. Yeah. It's largely what they're looking at is a boiler replacement and rooftop units. And I don't think that's going to be a time-consuming project, because a rooftop unit is, we got to disconnect what's there. But we've done rooftop units here in this building, and once they arrive on site, they can be switched out in a day. Now the boilers are going to be more extensive, but I don't think it's a project that's going to take a whole summer.
Did the RFP indicate any kind of timeline?
Yep, summer 2022.
Will we build in penalties for non-completion?
Well, that wouldn't be in the RFP. That would be in your bid contract documents. Yeah, that's later in the. I would say that's probably down here later in the notice of award on your schedule. you would put in your notice of award, here's our expectations.
On this here, on the thing that he gave us. On this timeline. We got at the board meeting. He didn't give it to us today, it's from the board meeting.
Other questions?
So the anticipation at this point is that everything is on the timeline, and our goal is that September 27th, we will actually select a person.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions on that? Okay, we're gonna give Dr. Ulmer a breath, and Mark, it's your turn.
So, facility tours, we've gone two. On June 22nd, the Buildings and Grounds Committee took a full tour of the Jersey Shore area middle school. The area of discussion during the tour, from what I can remember, were the football locker rooms. There's a lot of inadequate space in those locker rooms for the students that use them. We looked at the age of the mechanical and electrical equipment in the buildings. The auditorium capacity was a concern. During the meeting, overall use of the classroom spaces was given by key values throughout the whole building tour. For this specific meeting, we had scheduled the athletic facilities, but they were canceled due to the rain. The next one we had done.
Back up on that. What's the question in the auditorium?
I believe Keith had brought it up during the tour that getting all the students in there at one time was a bit of an issue, capacity.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm sure that's the case. It always has been the case. That is nothing new. I mean, you can't, there's no place to expand it to.
No, that was just something that he brought up.
I mean, even when we redid the high school one, it's still that, well, it's not that way anymore, I don't think. Now that there's a lot less than when I was there. Thanks.
The second tour we did was August 19th. This was for all the athletic facilities. The first tour we did was at the Thompson Street Stadium. A brief description of past projects including goal posts, the new scoreboard, bleacher renovations. Bathrooms and concessions were also observed there was some concerns there with ADA accessibility of the restrooms, as well as walking surface around the stadium, being that they're more of a screening type material. The second facility we toured was the varsity baseball field. Items of discussion there was the dual use of the field. With the football, they're using the outfield for a practice field during the off-season of baseball. Third facility was the soccer track complex. Again, a brief description of past projects, including track resurfacing, extensively cleaning the track surface and having it relined. Items of discussion were parking issues during the athletic events. That's definitely an issue there. Limited storage for team's equipment, additional scoreboard components, and the press box for announcing. The last facility was high school tennis courts. We actually ran into the tennis coach while we were doing our tour, so she enlightened us on some things. We did talk about a little bit of work that was done there, resetting the fence and the posts. Some of the things that she explained to us, that she has 3 courts that she typically uses. Most schools have 6 courts. It's definitely a time issue for her and the team. She stressed about the restroom facilities, spectator seating, lighting, and also, again, storage items for the teams.
Look at the tennis courts, if I remember correctly, one of the major issues is getting electrical to the courts.
Yeah, from the building, yeah.
Because of the parking lot, coming in the ground.
And that's been around forever too, because I know Chris Sprable used to bring his own generator, to
Oh, yeah.
run the ball machines. And
We have probably 7. They do have a portable generator there now, 4 of them. It's
Market track, that's the second track that's been put on that.
the second layer, yeah. 3
It was just over,
Overstraight.
yeah, it wasn't totally taken up and redone.
Yeah, that's what it needs to be. If it's properly maintained, they can get right over top of what's there. You gotta catch it before it gets.
It's gonna shut the line, but it's the door.
And then just, I think it was 2 years ago, we had a company come in and professionally clean it and reline it.
So, I won't put it on the spot, I don't feel like that spray over came in and was.
The first one?
The first layer was put in
2000, 1999, 2000.
Well, that's when the track was put in, period. Then there was one while I was there, so that'd have been after 2001, but I can't tell you what year. Well, it was 8 years after it went in because the reason I say that is because the cost was $80,000, and then I had them say, this is $8,000 a year. Why aren't we budgeting along the way for this, for the next time? Well, of course, now it's 5 times the amount of money, but so it was 8 years after it had first been put down.
The original was in 01, the relay was on 09. Well,
And then we just did something like, what, 2 years?
we did do cleaning in like 17, 18.
Yes. And reline it.
We have a general capital projects fund that we have. Should we have a second or a separate fund for athletic facilities? Because I think what's happened over the years is we always, we get down the list of all the things that we'd like to do, and then we get to sports or athletic fields, and then we don't do them. Whether it's the press box or whether it's resurfacing, we always put it off another year. So I was wondering if we should take a look at having a separate capital fund just for athletic.
Can you do that, or does it have to be a part of?
Work doesn't need funds within the fund.
Yeah, well, that's what I meant.
You can always do a designation of the fund. Whether or not you want to start working out and we can work out the accounting kinks in there, but I would still be concerned that we would still have the same issue. As far as getting board to commit to that fund, and B, saying, well, we're not going to do that this year because we need to do a roof project at JSASD. That priority list is always going to be there. Where's the priorities? Prioritizing that list, prioritizing those projects. That's the ultimate problem is the prioritization of the projects. Which one do we want to do first?
Right, I agree with you. And we also don't have, we've started to scratch the surface of our athletic facilities, of where we want to see them go, but we have not made any projections as to timelines.
No, and we did that kind of internal report. I think that was right before COVID it was right before Dr. Holman came.
Right.
We kind of did a kind of comprehensive overview of the facilities and then kind of talked about some alternatives. And we had basically one or two alternatives. Renovate everything or just scrap everything, start somewhere else.
That goes back to, again, the 6 courts versus 3 courts for tennis, resurfacing the track, new sod or going with turf on the soccer and football fields. If you look around at everybody we compete with, almost to a school, everybody's facilities are orders of magnitude better than ours.
And I think when you look at, I think this committee recognized that and the priorities of our goals and what we want to do. I think it's going to be a matter of, last year we heard Jamie Doyle present and talk about what your capacity for borrowing is. So I think we're going to have to decide at that point, and she'll be back again in the spring, how much of that are you going to say this is what we're going to put into athletics?
Because there wasn't much listed in that first numbers that we had.
Right. Because Hunt didn't put really much time into athletics.
Right.
And we've asked them to do that now.
And and to your point, I agree with what you said, and part of that is because the other schools have more recently updated their facilities, and we haven't touched ours. I mean, when did we put that drainage system in the field at the football field? I don't even want to think how many years ago that was. I mean, it's still it's still basically working, but it was a little messy on Friday.
Glad we're not playing here this week.
Yeah, I was watching that on TV, and I thought, oh my God, because I went home, and after we had that thing, I said, oh, we just had all that rain yesterday, and the field looked wonderful. There wasn't a puddle or anything in it, and then I'm watching that game on Friday night, and I'm thinking, oh.
I'm just glad we're not playing this week at home.
Good way to start the season.
Any other questions about the facility tours?
The schedules for.
Well, Mark, we also, even though we didn't go there, we also talked a little bit about softball and the situation that we have with softball on that tour. That the field is not ours, we're at the mercy of the borough. And we've had a working relationship with them, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that. We have.
Well, and I'll add to that because I had another meeting this week with softball coach, and we're somewhat back to where we were in the spring before the spring season, because that field was used all summer, and there's holes in the, there's low spots in the infield again. We got all that. Mark sent me a video yesterday when it was raining, what the ponds that were on that. So I asked Mark to look at bringing some dirt back onto that field again. Mark did talk to the borough even before this season about the condition of that field at the end of summer and what it looked like after it was used all summer. We're just in this scenario, this continuing pattern of, we fix it up, we use it for a season, we walk away. When we get it back at the beginning of the next season, we're fixing it up again to use it. And I know you're hearing complaints from softball coaches and players and parents about what that field looks like. Well, it looks like it looked at the beginning of the spring season before we fixed it up the last time. So now we're fixing it up again. You wouldn't have that problem if it was your field and you were controlling how it was used and who could use it, but we don't have any control over how it's used and who can use it. So we end up having to make it usable for what we need it for.
Do we have a formal lease agreement?
Yeah,
Is there a responsibility to maintain the field?
ours, when we're using them.
But,
There's
everybody, other people, other users are making it worse.
There's like a men's association that I don't know if we can, if like as a district, you could, in the borough, you could get together as a team and say, okay, let's look at what's happening here. We gave it to you in mint condition and you gave it back to us like this. So is there any way, even if we do the work, is there any way that we can help, they can help provide that little bit of,
Yeah, the issue is we don't have exclusivity in our lease, so other people can lease that same space.
There are other organizations that does that same.
Mark will initiate that.
You did reach out and ask to talk to them about that.
I talked to Earl weeks ago about the situation to see what we can do so it's fair for everybody. And I haven't heard back from them.
You just gotta keep going after them. And first of all, they don't have a fall sport, they don't use it in the fall, do they? Isn't it pretty much done? No,
They're pretty much done. But that's not to say, I'm not sure what their schedule is. They very well could. There's nothing to say.
the general isn't that they do, that unless they'd have a Labor Day tournament, but I haven't heard of one.
Months that they want to lease,
I have pulled up the lease. We have released especially for games in the field from March through May and August through October. DC will have priority over field during these periods. We will final decision conference decided by the Lodge Strategy Session 6. Conditioning, scheduling, and maintenance of premises, which is, there's a sentence sitting here that says, VC further agreed that field maintenance will be shared as agreed upon between VC and the Junior Shore Softball Association. VC agrees to keep the premises in good work order and repair and to surrender the premises in a good loving condition as they were on the date of the signing of this lease.
So we do that, but they don't.
Except for reasonable wear and tear. VC will maintain, the only real thing I see directed that we're directed at, we will maintain the grass and mowing year round.
Well, we ever got to go through this? Never, but there's the other part of this. Our pulling the road.
And maybe we need to have a meeting with all three. Okay.
And FYI, this lease goes until 2026.
Okay. And I just put a note on here that we'll continue to schedule those meetings. There should be another one coming out in October. I think when we picked up the schedule that Mark's secretary had before, which put us in the high school next. So we will, Mark and I just have to coordinate our schedule, and we will invite you to the next meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Francis pointed out exactly what I was going to point out. The next item on the agenda is Johnson House for exactly the reason that Mr. Francis stated in public comment, where I'm starting to get concerns about the use of that space and the use around that space. And I listed as Johnson House and high school entrance because it's really both. The concern of that being the entrance to the high school, the Johnson House is there, the use of the grass area around the Johnson House and how it's being used. I did get a concern that even when we have events going on in the stadium, people are being told by the neighbor they can't park in the yard there around the Johnson House because they need to be able to get to the back of their business. I'm just bringing it to this committee as a concern for some of the reasons that you heard, the way that the entrance to the complex looks, the way that our stadium looks. Talk about what some of the solutions are that we could entertain. I know it came up in the last board meeting about the Johnson House, and could we rework the electric to the stadium that we didn't have to have the Johnson House there? I did look, there is a pole probably right at the edge of our property that the electric runs from that pole across over to the roof of the Johnson House. So I think it could be feasible to run that a different direction, or we would have to look at, can we run it across that road or underneath? But there is a pole right at the edge of our property in that the power then goes across the air into the Johnson House. But I think it's buried from the Johnson House under the stadium.
It is. I looked at that before. We met with PPO. We can basically set a pole at the rear of the bathrooms and just power right around.
Well, we were also, a couple years ago, we voted that we would have some lights coming down that road. That never happened either, so. the Johnson House is all part of this. So there's that situation. Those lights never happen because that is dark when people leave in evenings, walking and eating, whatever the case may be. It's also basically right now, I mean, it was used for the life skills, but they now have their own thing in-house. So that's not needed anymore, but it's still used for storage. So we can find solutions to all those things, but that all has to be part of the thing. Not that we say we're going to cut down the Johnson House and put some parking in there or whatever it is that you want to put in there. We have to look at what's it being used for, how's it being used, and how do we undo that stuff? Because I think all those have to be part of it. And then we go from there. I know at one time, it happened once while I was up there. There was, you got the potholes and stuff in the entrance to the road at the high school. And PennDOT decided, okay, this is the day it was a school day, but this is the day we're fixing it. Can't use this road. That's just, that's just what they did. And so, what is that up there? What is that up there? Showcase. Showcase gave us the right of way to drive through around the Johnson House, and that's how the buses went out and came in. So, all those things there's solutions to all of it. It all has to be looked at as one picture, not as piecemeal and say, oh, I forgot about this or I forgot about that. It's just that if you're going to deal with it, then we need to deal with the whole picture and make sure we take care of those things as we're doing them.
I guess one of the questions I have maybe for the board is there any desire to sell that parcel? If I remember correctly, the concern.
Have you been in there to see that you sell that property? I don't know unless Showcase might want to buy it.
I know,
But we talked about in the past about putting some parking there.
And I agree with that, but I think before we would go down the road of finding all these alternatives, I think we would need this from the direction from the board that there's no desire for the district to sell that property. Understand? To quell that possibility.
Well, yeah, if you want to giving up land's not an easy thing.
And I'm not even recommending.
I understand what you're saying, but then to me, that's all part of the same pot.
Well, the infringement of the neighbor on property is creating problems. Has that been addressed with them at all?
I think multiple times.
They used to mow that up there. I don't know if they still do or not, up around the Johnson House. I don't know if they still do or not. Been a while for me.
I don't know that I would say ignored. Usually responsive if we talk to them and make some moves and address it, and then over time it gets back to where it is again.
How often does that happen? I mean, they're only up there when the sports are there.
That's what they were telling people, fans at the soccer game, that they couldn't park. Because now that we're apparently not using the space across the street for parking.
Along the fence.
On the opposite side, near the water
Oh,
company.
okay,
They're restricting that, so then people have to go somewhere.
okay.
And they were parking closer to Showcase's access point, I guess.
Lately, we're talking about they can't park.
Yep. Right.
Parking is no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Always has been, because people don't want to park down at the school and walk up.
Well, and like I said, some
And
of
then you
us
used-
are doing though. Because
Right,
we're
and then you used
restricting
to be able to park, like where Watson's is, well, that's full, there's no way you're parking there. I don't know where North Eden or whatever the name of that's, where they are with that, letting people do that and walk across.
parking. I've heard they're getting a little grumpy lately too, of people parking in their space, so.
Who's that?
North.
Oh, well, and I think it's back.
They had a change of ownership, I think.
Oh, And I think it's back to Mrs. Thomas's point of, I think there's space up there. We just aren't using it well. And one comprehensive approach might address some of the, like I look at all this space beyond, and we talked about that in our walkthrough. I look at all this space beyond the discus area and where the handicap parking is, that no one can park there because there's a fence. But if we rework that space as a parking lot, I think it would be a viable way to stop some of the problems that we're having. I don't know why it was done the way it was done, but I think there's some solutions there.
Because the house has already existed when they put that in up there.
I would like to use it.
The
What?
softball team have used it in the past too.
Yeah, it used to be JV field.
It's a nice field. The problem is getting people to the field.
That was in our athletic facilities proposal, we were gonna have our self-pacing monster.
So there's two issues with that. One, getting to it, because there's
Right.
only a path up over the bank. So that's the first issue. But the second issue is on the other side of the fence from the outfield of that softball field is it javelin?
Javelin's over there.
So there was an issue where there were two events happening at the same time. No, shot put.
No, the shot put's out at the other, on the outside, right by where the building is.
It's on the other side, but I don't think throw straight behind home plate.
What was the issue? A discus?
Discus in.
Discus.
Because they wouldn't need that kind of space for a shot put.
The discus went over the field, the outfield fence of the softball field. So that was the point where they said, we're not going to use that anymore because it's dangerous. I think we could put up, netting on posts to stop some of that. I've seen that in other places. But again, that only solves one issue. You still have to be able to get people to that field, which is not situated in a great spot. I mean, Mark and I have talked about, do we make a recommendation to fix that up so we can use that as our softball field? But there's a couple things that we would have to address, one of them being handicap accessibility to be able to use that space. That's where I think we're back to athletic fields as a priority. Is there anything that you would like to see from Mark and I about addressing this space?
Has making that one way helped?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know it causes...
I tried to get it for years.
I know it causes some traffic issues at the end of the day at the bottom of the hill, but safety-wise, it made a big difference. I mean,
And they just got to learn, okay, if you're going this way, you go down the right side. If you're going this way, you go down the left side, because your elementary school's already been out for almost an hour. Those parents are out and gone. If that was within the 5 minutes like it used to be, then that would be a real big problem. But
it's a temporary inconvenience. That's what PennDOT told me about my last traffic study. We tried to get a light put in at the end of the school entrance, and we asked PennDOT to do a study, and their response was, it's a temporary inconvenience. Okay, I guess we'll wait at the stop sign. But we can do that. We can, and then Mark and I have talked about some options, like whether or not, what it would look like to put up a fence. Even if it was on one side, that, coming in the main entrance, that there would be, you know, you wouldn't see that. And, you know, I said, we could put up a nice fence with a Bulldog logo on it, and we could landscape on the other side and really make it look presentable as an entrance. And there's some other things we can do, but you need to see what it would cost to put up a telephone pole and stretch that electric across, and putting in storage to address that. I made some notes, and lights. You need to get a comprehensive look at what that would cost. And then we can decide what are the priorities in which order. Okay, I made some notes.
And those schematics of, where the house is and where the line is.
Right.
Not very,
Have it. Any other questions about that? Okay. One other thing before we finish, and that is to talk about future meetings. Remind me when we met in the spring.
May, wouldn't it? Don't we usually do September and May?
You usually do it September, July.
Okay. July?
September, January, May.
I was like, wait a minute.
Mita. Okay. I was thinking January, but I wanted to double check that. I'm looking at the calendar. Is there a particular day that works better for it? Anybody? Okay. I don't see anything right now that would cause an issue. We will be back.
The person that had most conflicts before was Dave, because of
Mhm.
the ACT. Before that,
Patrice and I are retired. Wayne's retired. We can handle it.
All right. Well, how about I'm looking at the board meeting schedule. Oh, we don't have the board meeting schedule yet.
January will be the 10th and the 24th.
10th and the 24th. Do you want to go to the week of the 17th, so it's a different week?
That'd be fine. 20? Oh, that's Thursday.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a Thursday right now, so it is Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to stick with that Thursday, the 20th?
That's fine with me. You
And
okay with
I'll-
that, Patrice? Leaving in at 3?
Okay. I will add that to my calendar. 3. Do you want me to? I'm just gonna I'm gonna put it out right now as an invite so that we're all on the same page. And if we need to change that invite, we can. Oops. Anybody have anything else?
You want to identify May?
Oh, we can. I think I got everybody on that
We
one.
usually do.
Okay. What about May? You said May. May. The board meetings are the 9th and the 23rd. We can go, if we're okay with that Thursday like today, we can go right to the 19th.
I have doctor appointments in State College in the afternoon.
Oh, well then we'll make it a different day.
You go the 18th, I'm okay there.
Okay. Does anybody else have an issue with the 18th? The May
Wednesday.
18th, it's a Wednesday.
But with the new law, any items on the board agenda, you will potentially move them to Wednesdays, so that if you like putting on the next board meeting agenda, you could. You know, it's 24 hours. When does the board get Thursdays?
Thursday, but as long as they're on the agenda that's posted by
Right.
Friday, and actually, the agenda technically doesn't have to be posted until 24 hours before. So we can amend the posted agenda until the 24-hour deadline. So I think
I'm fine
we're,
Thursday. I just want to make sure.
Well, May is a Wednesday.
right.
Monday is
Well, it's all, I mean, if we see in January that that causes a problem, we already moved May to Wednesday. We'll just have to keep it that way going forward. 3.
3.
I'm actually putting this in as an invite, so you'll get an email with all that information on it, so we're all on the same page.
Does anyone else have any further questions? For tonight, for today, I guess, is not really.
Saw a hand.
Yes, sir.
But back to the HVAC project, are you talking about selecting a project architect? Are you talking about selecting that person? Is that what you're talking about?
We're selecting we're calling it an energy savings project. We're selecting the contractor. We have the architect already with Hunt Engineering. They have been approved already as our architect. We're selecting the contractor.
So then the architect wants to put the project out to bid.
It did that.
That's what you're talking about.
The project will still be bid, but the architect will Hunt Engineering will do the design in collaboration with the district and the construction management firm.
Right. So you're lining enough time
Mm-hmm.
for the architect to develop the specs, and then you're lining, it's not like a pretty tight schedule.
So the architect they were approved at the last meeting. So they have it from now until November, December to do that design work.
Because they're suggesting we bid in January, February.
Yep.
And the work will be done next summer.
Nope, you're welcome.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Give the community a quick cash update. Right now, capital projects is sitting at $820,349.87. I believe there's still some bills outstanding, probably not many, on the CT wall project.
Please tell me you like this new space.
He did.
I keep going to write them and I
It looks
forget.
great.
Another update for us, that's all. Like,
Yeah, it took us 4 years, but we got them there. Mr. Francis.
Dr. Ullman, would you tell us kindly how old you are?
Sure, I am 39.
Is that right?
They keep trying to guess.
Well, now it's public. Apparently you can find it because I had somebody tell me in an interview. I will never forget that story.
They probably figured it out by when you graduated.
Well, I hope so. That's my goal.
next year, if we say 39 again.
I will be that until next year in 2022, but real early.
All right, we're going to call this meeting to adjournment at 4:07.
You know what?